38-year-old Galina Kolodnitskaya is met by family at Kiev airport. She arrived with hundreds of foreign evacuees. Her story distinctly different from the many others fleeing the violence in Libya. In these undated pictures, Kolodnitskaya stands close to the heart of the Gaddafi regime. She was one of 4 Ukrainian nurses taking care of him, but a US diplomatic cable published by WikiLeaks late last year claimed the Libyan leader was deeply attached to Kolodnitskaya. The cable described her as a voluptuous blonde who always travelled with the Gaddafi as only she knew his routine. It's believed the two may have been romantically involved. Back in Ukraine, Kolodnitskaya is avoiding public attention, all while Gaddafi's leadership teeters precariously. Neve Barker, Al Jazeera, Moscow.
A former British security contractor has been sentenced to life in prison after admitting to shooting dead 2 men in Iraq. He's the first Westerner to be convicted in an Iraqi court since the 2003 US invasion of the country. Jenna Raff reports.
For Danny Fitzsimons, it could have been so much worse. Hours after he arrived in the country 2 years ago, in a drunken rage, he shot and killed an Australian and British co-worker and wounded an Iraqi guard. That's not in dispute. The question was his state of mind when he did it. The verdict, not death by hanging, but life in prison. In Iraq, though, that means just 15 years, a far shorter sentence than he likely would have received in the West.
We respect the independence of the Iraqi judicial system and note the court's verdict and the sentence. We will continue to offer consular assistance to Mr. Fitzsimons. At this time, we should also remember the families of those who died in the tragic incident Mr. Fitzsimons was on trial for.
His lawyer here says it wouldn't have gone nearly so well if the trial hadn't dragged on for a year. A year ago, the legacy of the U.S. security firm Blackwater shooting dead 14 civilians in a Baghdad square was still very much alive. It led Iraq to ban the company and put strict controls on private security firms. When it came time to negotiate a new security agreement with the U.S., it made sure to insist that the immunity they always had be dropped. Post-traumatic stress disorder isn't widely understood here. Most of the country probably suffers from it. Fitzsimons' lawyer says the court decided that while his client was mentally competent, the horrors he'd seen as a British soldier in Kosovo had left him deeply troubled.
Danny
is sick. He has lots of illnesses. If you read the medical report, the British medical reports, and the reports from the medical committee, says he has been exposed to very ugly scenes in Kosovo. This illness makes the one who has it feel like everyone else is his enemy, and the slightest provocation will have dangerous consequences.
And then there was the drinking. He drank a liter of scotch when he opened fire on his colleagues. There are still tens of thousands of private security contractors in Iraq. For most of the war, they were immune from being prosecuted here. But now Iraq has responsibility for its own security. And with this ruling, they've made clear they will administer their own justice as well. Jane Araf, Al Jazeera, Baghdad.
Stay with Al Jazeera. We'll have lots more after the break, including the latest from the Cricket World Cup.
It is in the details. A look, a connection, the moments that reveal the truth. Award-winning documentaries from critically acclaimed filmmakers. Witness documentaries to open your eyes. At this time on Al Jazeera.
Time right now for all the sport with Stuart.
Thank you. We'll start at the Cricket World Cup, where the West Indies fast bowler Kemar Roach has become only the 6th player to take a hat-trick in the tournament's 36-year history. The big moment came during the Group B clash against the Netherlands in Nagpur, and Rahul Pathak rounds up Monday's action.
It's a sign of the poor state of West Indies cricket that the game against the Netherlands was by no means regarded as a foregone conclusion. The Windies' heavy loss to South Africa in the opening match, coupled with the Dutch heroics against England, had some sensing an upset. But the men from the Caribbean can still boast some of the game's most destructive batsmen, and after being sent in Nagpur, they climbed into the Dutch bowling with relish. The highlight was Kieran Pollard's 60 from just 27 balls, as the West Indies reached 330 for 8 from their 50 overs. Netherlands made 292 against England in their last game, but chasing a huge total brings its own kind of pressure. Tom Cooper showed his colleagues how it should be done. Just like that, he would go on to make an unbeaten 55, but then Kemar Roach decided to make his little bit of history. The 22-year-old became the 6th bowler to take a World Cup hat-trick. He took 6 for 27 in total to blow away the Dutch batsman for 115. The West Indies win by 215 runs. Meanwhile, in Group A, the Canadians gave further ammunition to those who believe the Minnows shouldn't be in the World Cup. Shown to be out of their depth against Sri Lanka, they weren't much better against Zimbabwe in New Delhi. The Zimbabweans racking up 298 for 9 off their 50 overs. In reply, the Canadians would have had hopes of improving on their last innings of 122 all-out against Sri Lanka, and they did, by 1 run. The Canadian batsmen collapsing to the Zimbabwean spinners for just 123. Zimbabwe record their first win of this World Cup by 175 runs. Rahul Pathak, Al Jazeera.
The next match in the World Cup is also in Group A, Sri Lanka taking on Kenya. The joint hosts Sri Lanka have something to prove to their home fans after defeat to Pakistan in their capital Colombo on Saturday. Sri Lanka have now won 1 and lost 1 after beating Canada in their opening match, and they now face another of the World Cup outsiders, Kenya, once again in Colombo. With the Sri Lankan star fast bowler Lasith Malinga likely to return after injury, coach Trevor Bayliss is confident that his side will bounce back.
Our guys know that we can play a lot better than that, and that we have played a lot better than that in the last 2 years. And I'm sure they'll be out to prove and show how just